So before we share in communion, which is probably the greatest of the love songs, isn't it, in some ways, that God has sung for us, we're going to look at a story in one of the Gospels that might at first sight appear to be a curious choice, but it is a story, I believe, that shows many things, and there are many tangents in this story that we could go off at. And I will try very hard to stick to the point, which is how much Jesus showed his love, that we might understand how much he loves us. So I am going to read from John chapter 8 and the first 11 verses. Thank you. Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. At dawn, he appeared again in the temple courts, where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away, one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." Might need this, I think. Don't know why I'm all croaky. It's dawn, and Jesus appears to have been up all night. If we read right those early verses that I read. And now here he is at the temple early teaching, and he is interrupted. Can you imagine the kerfuffle of the arrival of the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, bringing in this woman, and how everybody would have been kind of getting out of the way and wondering what was going on? I imagine Jesus had to stop because the kerfuffle would have been such an interruption. And those who are listening to Jesus begin to look around to see what's happening. The scribes, the Pharisees, the teachers of the law are kind of bristling with righteousness. Can you imagine that, bristling with righteousness? And the crowd may be a bit embarrassed, uncomfortable, curious. There's a funny tension in the air because nobody quite knows what's going to happen next. The woman, if you noticed, silent, doesn't say anything until right at the end of the story. I wonder if she's covered. I wonder if she was dragged in such a hurry that she hardly had time to put anything on. I wonder if she grabbed a sheet and she's standing there kind of all trying to make yourself as small as possible, you know, hastily covered maybe. Nobody quite knows whether she's unclean or not, so better not get too close. And she hasn't even got a name. Denied the dignity of a name. But I do wonder, actually, whether John, who tells the story, whether he chose to withhold the name, because maybe, just maybe, this encounter with Jesus had such an effect on her. She went on to live a totally transformed life. And he's kept her privacy, her dignity. That's what I like to think. And I bet everybody here, at some stage in your life, has felt that writhing humiliation in some setting or another. Maybe as a child at school, maybe something's happened to you that was just such a complete embarrassment that you didn't know where to put yourself. That kind of humiliation of exposure. Maybe you weren't quite exposed like she was, but you got found out in some way. There's all sorts of ways that you could end up kind of in this place of humiliation. But I bet you've all felt it, haven't you? Yeah. You all know what that feels like. We don't have to be in her shoes to know something of her experience. Because it's life, isn't it? We get things wrong. Sometimes we get things right, but are still blamed for things that other people think we've done. And we still end up in that place of feeling humiliated, even when we've got nothing to be ashamed of. Somehow we're still in that place. The major events of life, the smaller things of life, can all have that impact. And they end up making us feel like we're not good enough, don't they? Not good enough, don't deserve anything. We're just not good enough at all. We could call it shame. And shame basically makes us believe that we're not worthy. We're just not worthy. And so who would want to be friends with us? Who would want to love us when we're not worthy? The scribes and the Pharisees tell Jesus that she was caught in the act. You almost feel like there's a wink there, don't you? Caught in the act. Where was the man? Indeed. Indeed. Because there had to have been two of them, didn't there? There had to have been two of them. And they quote the law. They quote the law of Moses to Jesus. And they say, she should be stoned. What do you say, Jesus? Because under Jewish law, under Moses' law, the law of Moses, it was punishable by death. She should be stoned. She's been judged and condemned and found guilty without even so much as a what happened. John, don't you just love John, the way that he sometimes goes, but I'm going to tell you something that you need to know. Did you notice John doing that in the story? He goes, it's a trap. Just so that you get the picture of what's going on here. We're not going to look at the trap now, okay? We could go off on a tangent and look at the trap, but we're not going to do that now. I want to focus on the woman and how Jesus treated her. So picture her standing there. Can you see her? Standing next to Jesus, probably. Crowds of people around that were there listening to Jesus. The crowds that have brought the woman, they're now there. All the passers-by have stopped, probably, wondering what's going on. And there she is, caught. Do you think she's standing there in a kind of a, don't you dare, don't you? I don't think she's standing like that, do you? I think she's probably head down, head hung, just kind of can't look at you. Imagine what it must have been like for her in front of the whole crowd. All eyes, every single eye on you. every single eye. So what does Jesus do now? What does he do? Does he speak? Does he argue the law? Does he ask her what happened? Doesn't do any of those things, does he? He does probably what they least expected, and that's a hallmark of Jesus, isn't he? Isn't it? He does what nobody expects. He bends down and he begins to write in the sand. And suddenly, everybody's trying to see what he's writing. They're kind of getting round. Can you see what he's writing? No. Can you? No. They're all looking at the sand to see what he's doing. Commentators, commentaries, all speculate on what he's writing. I think that's the wrong question. I don't think we should be speculating on what he wrote. I think we should be wondering why. Why did he write in the sand? I think my view, my opinion, is that all the eyes of the crowd were now on him and what he was writing, and he could not have covered her with more dignity than if he'd dressed her. Because suddenly all their attention is on him, and she's no longer being stared at. Isn't that an act of love? No words, no judgment, no questions, no nothing. But he's taken their gaze and drawn it to himself. He's covered her. He's covered her humiliation. He's covered her shame. And I wonder if that's where healing began. The greatest act of compassion, I think, and love for her. Done kindly, done quietly, diverting attention, not drawing attention to her, drawing that attention to himself. And the scribes and the Pharisees keep on with their questions, and he just quietly writes away. How does the woman feel now, I wonder? Maybe. When she arrived, she was sure she was going to be stoned. Now, I guess she's beginning to wonder what might happen. I just love the eyewitness detail of the Gospels. When Jesus straightened up, I guess he stood up. And he doesn't answer any of their questions. He doesn't go into any of their details. He gets completely the fact that there's a trap there. And he just simply says, go ahead, stone her. I bet that got her attention. Go ahead, stone her. Only if you have never sinned yourself. Now who's caught in the trap? They are. They're caught in their own trap, aren't they? They're absolutely caught in their own trap because they knew they weren't sinless. And so Jesus gives them a bit of time now. He goes back to writing in the sand while they think about what he's just said. And I wonder when it started. Thud, 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 as they drop their stones and drift away. And as they drift away and there's nobody left but the two of them, Jesus says, where are they? Does no one condemn you? And she says, no one, sir. Very respectful, isn't it? No one, sir. And Jesus said, neither do I. He didn't come to condemn, did he? He didn't come to judge. He came to love. Can't you feel the love he's got for this woman? Absolute love for this woman. And he says, go and sin no more. Go and live differently. Go and live a different life. Take this opportunity to start again. We don't know whether she did or whether she didn't. But what we do know is how Jesus treated her in that moment. And if she wanted to take the opportunity, it could be an absolutely transforming moment for her. Absolutely. He showed her mercy. He showed her grace. He showed her love. And that's what God shows you and me. Absolute mercy, absolute grace, absolute love. Not because you deserve it, because we don't, but because he loves us. And Jesus is here, offering that same love and compassion.